Start.
Okay. Dr. Collins White, I think we should get started. We'll have others join us, but let's go.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first EL work group meeting of 2022. I'm Dr. Deanne Collins. I'm the Deputy State Superintendent for the Office of Teaching and Learning at the Maryland State Department of Education. I've been designated by State Superintendent Mr. Chaudhary to facilitate today's meeting, and he would love to be here, but I'm happy to report that his wife gave birth to a beautiful.
Oh my God.
Yes, yes. So he is spending time with family. So say hi. But we are so excited for him and his family. But he is very thankful to the work group and the school community for making an investment in this work. So he's very appreciative. We can move on to the next slide. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed via MSDE's YouTube channel. So our agenda today will include a presentation from Casa de Maryland. Then we will have a discussion amongst our work group about communication with our different stakeholders and families, in particular our multilingual families. And then at the end, we will have a chance to share with you our plans for future meetings and what the structures will be. And we want to make sure that we publicly have all the dates announced so that everybody's aware of our future meetings and just how we'll continue to work together throughout the rest of the year. Okay. We have two guiding questions that will guide today's discussion, and this has been a standard practice that has worked well for our previous meetings. And so our first guiding question is, what challenges do multilingual families face navigating the educational system in Maryland? And how can the EL work group collaborate with community organizations to establish a comprehensive language access policy? So we believe that our discussions today will help us to think about those questions and how we might want to respond based on what we'll hear today. So to kick us off, I'm really excited. I'm very honored to introduce our speaker for today and a presenter. He's from Maryland, very nationally known and internationally recognized for his leadership and vision around immigrant rights. Gustavo Torres, Executive Director of Casa de Maryland. Gustavo came to the United States as a result of the political and economic unrest in his country of origin, Colombia. He joined Casa's staff as a community organizer and became Casa's executive director in 1994. Under his leadership, Casa has grown from a small social service organization to a nationally awarded multi-service advocacy, organizing, and support agency with a staff of nearly 150 and a membership of over 97,000, operating in multiple states, including Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Mr. Torres has spearheaded several very ambitious campaigns, statewide, but also nationally. This includes the Maryland DREAM Act, providing in-state tuition to undocumented students, the establishment of welcome centers that serve as a model for organizations across the United States, efforts to allow all Maryland drivers to obtain a driver's license regardless of their status, and the partnership to increase the minimum age in Maryland, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, and Baltimore City. Wow, those are exciting accomplishments. Most recently, Gustavo helped to pass legislation mandating housing protections for tenants in Montgomery County and police accountability legislation in the state. Leaders and elected officials across the state have tapped Mr. Torres to serve on numerous task forces addressing issues of diversity, immigrant rights, and multiculturalism, as well as multiple transition teams for governors, county executives, and mayors. So, in alignment with our guiding questions, he will share information about Casa as well as best practices about how we can better engage families. So, at this time, I'm very honored to turn it over to Mr. Torres to present to us today. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Dr. Collins' presentation, I really appreciate that, and I hope that I provide to you some information about my organization and the way how we integrate services for our community. But also, I just want to let you know that me is our Director and Chief of Services, Mr. George Escobar, who I'm very sure that is going to add a little bit more specifically about one of the programs that we are very proud of called Learning Together. So you are going to see George to go in deep on that conversation because we believe that it's important that all of you know the great work that we are doing with the parents and kids. So you are going to have all the entire picture. So thank you one more time, Dr. Collins. I really appreciate that. So let's go and start it first with I understand that you are going to put the presentation right there, right? So let's go and presentation right there, right? So let's go and start it if you don't mind. Thank you very much. A little bit, can you go to the next one, please? Thank you very much. I want to go to describe a little bit our organization. We are the largest grassroots immigrant and advocate and services organization in the Mid-Atlantic. In fact, I just want to let you know that last year, the board of directors of Casa approved to expand to Georgia also. So we are very proud to let you know that we also, in addition to being in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, and Virginia, now we are in Georgia, and our goal is to make sure that we provide the same services and advocacy and organizing that we do in other different states. You know, as you know, Georgia have more than 1 million Latinos and immigrants, and we believe that it's important that we share the experience and the model that we have. So Casa is a 36 years old organization providing high quality services for the immigrant community. And for our members, we currently have more than 115,000 members that they are immigrants and working class. So we provide human services, community organizing. We develop strategic campaigns in order to serve the full spectrum of the needs, dreams, and aspiration of our members. That is the reason why we exist. That is the reason why our organization is very successful, because we not only provide services, we not only advocate, we not only organize, but we have this comprehensive and very, very important approach for our families and our community. And as a part of that, of course, that we have a very, very important one that is related with the education program. Can you go please to the next one? Thank you very much. This is a picture of some of our work in Washington, D.C. and in all different areas fighting for immigration reform. We believe that one of the main issues that our community faces is the lack of immigration status. And that is the reason why our members say that a top priority for our families is to finally pass immigration reform in Washington, D.C. We have been working very aggressively, advocating, mobilizing, organizing our community, because 11 million people who are undocumented deserve an opportunity in our country. Please go to the next one. Thank you very much. So the next one is about a little bit about Casa Education Department. I want to describe our department in 3 different areas. Number one, in the work that we're doing with the parents. Number two, the work that we do with youth. And number three, the work that we're doing in coalitions. Because I think that the only work that is effective from our viewpoint is when we work together with many different organizations and working in coalition. So Casa, the Department of Education, work specifically to emphasize on multi-generational holistic approach. We believe, and it's very clear, and all the different approaches. The best one is to be very multi-generational, and that is the way how we do that. And we focus in the three different areas. Number one, with the parents. Every single year we have between 800 to 1,000 students annually in 4 different levels that graduate in our ESOL classes. So we are very, very proud of this because we believe that that is a very, very important tool for our families to be successful. Even that the people work in 2 or 3 different jobs, they always come to us and say, I want to learn English. I believe that the only way how we are going to be successful in this country if it's I learn English. So we are very, very proud that we partnered with Michael in Montgomery County, the Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy, to provide these kind of classes to our parents. So the same place and the same schools where the kids go to classes during the morning, parents go to classes during the evening. And that is a beautiful partnership. And I hope really that this kind of approach that we have with the Michael is going to be an approach that we can do at the state level, because in Montgomery County is so very successful. And we have a very clear and concrete results of how we change the life of our parents when they go to classes, when they become, proficient in English. It's so very powerful to see people who used to work in cleaning companies or used to work in as a day laborers and now working in a different places, making minimum wage, living wage for the family. So that is a very, very powerful example of the way how we not only provide ESOL classes, but also how we identify jobs for the parents to make sure that they are successful right over here in our state, in our country. The another very important piece that we do is what we call the Youth Enrichment Program called Mi Espacio. Mi Espacio is a very, very successful project that began in Baltimore. And now I'm very pleased to share with you that it's extended to Langley Park, Prince George County, but also in Virginia and Pennsylvania. This extraordinary youth enrichment program, what we're doing specifically is that we help people, we help the kids to make sure that they increase the GPA and are very successful in the school. In fact, good outcome include over 80% improve in school attendance. That is a very, very amazing outcome that we have do the Mi Espacio program. It's so very important, and you see that is the reason what we call that is multi-generational holistic approach, because for one side is the parents to make sure that they learn English, and the other one is to make sure that the kids are very successful in the school with my Espacio program. And the last piece that I want to mention is about the working in coalition. As I mentioned at the beginning, coalitions are so very important, not only to provide services, but also to advocate. When I say coalition, we refer to Michael, for instance, how we work together to make sure that we bring English classes to the parents, but also the way how we advocate in Annapolis, in Prince George County, in Baltimore County, in Baltimore City, in Montgomery County, to make sure that we bring tools, educational tools to the parents. And I am very, very proud to share with you that we are part of the organizations that helped to create the Maryland Alliance for Racial Equity in Education, the Black and Brown Coalition in Montgomery County. That is the kind of work that we're doing. We believe that we need to work together. The communities need to work together to make sure that we have better outcomes for our kids, for our families. And that is the reason why we do it all the time. We believe that it's so essential that we do this together to make sure that we make a difference in our kids and our parents. Please, next, if you don't mind. Now, I'm going to speak and go too very deep on the Aprendiendo Juntos, and I'm going to invite my coworker and the Director of Chief, George Escobar, to speak about Aprendiendo Juntos. But first of all, let me describe a little bit what Aprendiendo Juntos is, right? Aprendiendo Juntos is as I mentioned, it's a multi-generational holistic approach that is so very, very important for our families and for our communities. It's a bilingual family engagement initiative, a culturally responsive approach to parents' engagement, an approach addressing the cultural, linguistic, and economic obstacles present in many immigrant households, complementing the academic and family resources of local schools, and establishing new educational pathways for both child and parents. So that is pretty much what learning together is. It's a very comprehensive approach. And I want to ask my coworker, George Escobar, to go in details in Aprendiendo Juntos. George, are you with us?
Yes, Gustavo, thank you very much for that frame. And this is one of the best practices that we have learned in our work in Prince George's County specifically, and a bit in Baltimore, that we think is something that is as very scalable and is something that we'd like to bring to the attention of the work group to recommend on implementing on a statewide basis. Again, as Gustavo described, this is a holistic approach to parent engagement. It is providing academic support. Learning Together is the framework under which all of this work happens. So it's providing educational enrichment opportunities for children, engaging parents in the education of the children in a culturally proficient way. And the third piece of it is engaging teachers at schools that have majority or have large immigrant populations, so that they understand the context in which the children live and are learning from. So again, central to the Learning Together's kind of theory of action is that two-generational approach, right? Ensuring that there's positive academic and social outcomes for the parents and their children through programming that really targets both. So Learning Together itself was really founded on a nationally recognized evidence-based parent engagement program you guys may have heard of. It's called Abriendo Puertas. It is a coalition of different providers. There's a ton of resources that are available and adaptable to really be able to tailor to specific communities. Now, the idea of the program is that it allows parents to receive support and services through a series of classes, workshops, enrichment opportunities, really tailored to the specific age and the grade level that you choose to take on. Can we look at the next slide, please, to get a little bit of this? This shows you here a little bit of our kind of journey in this work. At Casa, we had initially incorporated this work as part of the Promised Neighborhood Planning Grant that we obtained in about 2012, 13, 14. So you all may be familiar with this. Of course, this was a federal program under the Department of Education, last implemented by the Obama administration. This was all part of the work that we had worked. Learning Together was a fundamental piece of a broader Promised Neighborhoods initiative in which we engaged all area providers in a series of interventions. But the core component was this parent engagement initiative. Unfortunately, the Trump administration did away, as you all know, for the PN program, but the Department of Ed still looked at creative ways in which to kind of lift up some of this parent engagement work. And so we were able to engage with them in what they call the I3 grant program, and that was able to lift up certain components of this Learning Together curriculum. Through this work, we really developed an extraordinary partnership and buy-in from specifically Prince George's public schools, and where we tied this parent engagement work to the rollout of the international schools that were being built in Langley Park and in Largo. And we really, as a consequence to that, developed parent and youth leaders who then we're able to be prepared to successfully advocate for the expansion of the community school model, right? And eventually into what we're all working on today, right? Which is the blueprint advocacy and the realization of that long-term work and where we are now. But unfortunately, comprehensive funding was not sustained despite great outcomes and a great evaluation. We partnered with the Urban Institute, for example, to do a comprehensive evaluation of the work. And unfortunately, beginning in 2019, the program was significantly scaled down, right? And as we all know, then we fast forward a little bit into 2020. We know the pandemic has really exacerbated some of these education disparities we already know, and especially along the achievement and the technology gaps. It really has that has really disproportionately affected our immigrant families. Correct. So really, this has really highlighted the need to be more creative with these multi-generational approaches and really invest in a lot more strategic way into some of these parent engagement initiatives. So next slide, please. And let's look a little bit into the specific components. So essentially, the components of the Learning Together framework basically consist of these pillars, right? Gustavo already mentioned a little bit about the Mi Espacio after school youth engagement initiative. So that to its core, it combines daily homework help with life skills development, including work readiness, financial literacy, health education, leadership development, and community service. So the idea there is that it's promoting a high school graduation, post-secondary enrollment, and also has a career readiness components, including completion of like an 80-hour summer internship program that we created in partnership with local businesses, local nonprofits, and local organizations. So there you're taking care of the youth. There you're taking you're providing these academic resources. Now, fundamental to also this program is also individualized work that we do through community resource navigators. So these folks work to provide not only individualized outreach to be a funneling source into the program, but also to follow up and target parents to help assess their needs, navigate them to available resources, both within Casa and around and through the social safety nets. And often these services, are provided directly through us. But the idea is that we're assessing the needs and we're really navigating folks towards these resources. And these community resource navigators wind up to be, at a certain level, a little bit like case managers to try to navigate these folks through their needs. One of the innovative steps here is the parent as teacher session. So in Spanish we call them padres como maestros. So in here we do a series of workshops designed to engage and orient parents about the education of their children. The idea there is that we're allowing them the infrastructure to become better advocates and champions of their children's success in school. So the workshops here can include subjects such as know your rights sessions on parents' rights before the school system, background on how the school system is governed and run, and the different offices and responsibilities that happen administratively within the individual schools and the school system itself, and of course tips on providing homework at home. So also some after school and some at home kind of instruction on how to help your children academically, right? And here, another piece we want to talk about a little bit more in depth is the Teacher-Parent Connections Institute. So this is where we increase the cultural competency of school staff themselves. Here we target specifically the teachers to try to create a more welcoming and inclusive school environment. So next slide, please. So this is what, again, we call the TPC, the Teacher-Parent Connections Engagement Institute. Again, the idea here is to connect schools with families and bring together the teachers and parents while leveraging the resources and knowledge of immigrant serving community-based organizations, in this case of Casa, to improve the learning experience for immigrant youth. So in Casa, the Institute was provided in two different versions to accommodate teacher schedules. So one was what we call the Summer Institute, So that provided a 40-hour kind of 5-day experience during the summer break. And the second is kind of a rotating series of workshops that accumulate and are equivalent to 40 hours of instruction, but those were offered throughout the school year. And again, these workshops were targeted at those new international schools that were coming online in Prince George's County. But the focus here of the workshops was on the historical and the cultural context of the students and the families' lives, and why that's a vital part of engaging parents and children. So the idea is to help parents develop skills in culturally proficient parent engagement strategies. Here, the workshops include presentations with various experts in the field, engaging teachers on, for example, the history of immigration to the area, an analysis of what contributes to this migration. Students and parents are brought in to participate in panels as well to discuss their immigrant experience. We also provide an analysis of current immigration policies and their impact on families attending those area schools, as well as provide to the teachers themselves tips on self-care, wellness, and provide them resources that they can then take back to the classroom and implement in their classes. But the idea here overall is to provide best practices on parent engagement within this immigrant context. And it's shared by participants and the participants are encouraged to create and execute their own engagement plans in the classroom. So the budget itself allows for a small stipend to be distributed to the teachers directly for them to implement their plans at the end of the session. So in the past, we'd also had collaborated with MSDE to provide professional development credits for some of these classes. Again, subject to those criteria. So the teachers complete the 5-day summer institute. They complete a parent engagement project, report back on the outcomes, and we provide them an additional individualized professional development session. So that encapsulates a lot of the work that we did. We'll go to the next slide. That's a little bit of an overview of our Learning Together framework. Again, we present it to you as a best practice in parent engagement, and we hope to talk to you a bit more about the possibilities that we have to scale up this kind of programming and really insert this as a core fundamental principle of how we want to motivate our teachers to be to engage their parents in a much more systemic way. Here, we also wanted to come before you and talk a little bit about the emerging needs of newcomers that we have in our area. Right? When we talk about newcomers, they're defined by the Department of Homeland Security as unaccompanied minors. But this is a really important. We want to underline this as another strategy we'd like this work group to really look into in terms of how to address these needs, because the number of folks that are coming to our state is increasing, and the infrastructure we have to support them is not meeting the need at this time, right? Of course, we all know that Maryland has long been one of the largest receiving communities for Central American migrants, right? Although the makeup of the population that's coming in is increasingly changing. Recent statistics demonstrate that a steady increase in the number of unaccompanied youth arriving to the state are attempting to reunite with family members that they have long been separated from. Right? So there's obviously family reunification issues, there's mental health trauma, and there's an important issue here that has to do with the demographics of the kids that are coming in, right? Here, you'll see that although as a state we rank 6th, individual counties within the state itself rank within the top 15 as well. So these populations are concentrated disproportionately in different counties throughout the state. Right? We see here that 72% of this population that's coming in is really already 15 and over. So we're talking about folks that are going to have challenges incorporating learn and a limited amount of time for them to get their English proficiency up to be at standards enable them to graduate. 68% of them currently are male or boys. So that gives you an idea what those demographics look like, right? In terms of numbers, we know that over the past fiscal year, this amounts to about 7,500 youth. 54, it's about a 54% increase from the pre-pandemic high we saw in 2019. So again, this is an increasing trend. And you'll notice also that many of the folks are coming from and are actually have Spanish as their second language, right? They're of indigenous heritage, and their indigenous language is what is their primary method of communication. So real quickly on the next slide, what we really would like this panel, this committee to look into is how to be more strategic and coordinated around attending to the needs of this population, right? Currently, we see some jurisdictions such as Montgomery County, Baltimore City to a lesser degree, attempt different strategies and investments to specifically target these youth and their families. But we are seeing that we're not seeing a cohesive response to helping these youth navigate through available services and increase their educational outcomes. We don't see a coherent statewide strategy, right? The experiences of newcomer families attempting to enroll their children in school, for example, is wildly different across our jurisdictions and across our counties. The experience of somebody enrolling in Montgomery County is totally different than one in Prince George's and Baltimore, in the Eastern Shore, and so on, right? And given the age and the language proficiency at which many of these youth enter the system once they're enrolled, it is likely a significant number may wind up as being considered overaged, right? Forced to leave the system because of their age, and under-credentialed, unable to obtain their credential or diploma in the time that they're enrolled in the public school system. So that's why, obviously want to encourage creative uses and culturally proficient uses and investments and partnerships with nonprofits in various career readiness programs. I think working collaboratively with community colleges, industry certified apprenticeships is certainly key, but just as important is partnering with nonprofits. For example, Casa, which we provide a number of vocational trainings, also the comprehensive, culturally proficient wraparound services that those kids really need to survive. We need all of those services and all of those inputs working together in a coordinated fashion to really address the social determinants and create a comprehensive plan for folks to improve their educational and career. So we want to thank you very much for your time. Hopefully we didn't go over so much, but we wanted to provide those two key strategies for you to review, to look at, to consider as best practices. Obviously, our learning together approach, and the need to really structure a comprehensive, coordinated strategy to the needs of.
Thank you, George.
Successes. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Spinato, there was one question in the chat that I see. So she'll facilitate that and then facilitate if there are other questions and continue with the rest of the meeting. That was a fabulous presentation. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the community as well as the EL work group has as well. So thank you. Susan, I'll turn over to you.
Thank you very much. I did want to, I'm taking a look at the chat box, and Anne Marie had several comments, very positive comments about the program, particularly the Parents as Teacher program. And she did have one question. Does the Parents as Teachers program provide support to families of younger children?
No, that's a great question. I think our experience, again, because we tied that program towards the enrollment of folks in the new international high schools. So our focus was on that middle school transitioning to high school kind of population as we were building up the enrollment for those new schools. But I think theoretically the framework can work to age specific and grade specific populations, right? Obviously, you're going to have different. The curriculum is going to be different, and the engagement strategies are going to be a little bit different, obviously. But I think theoretically, right, it would work regardless of the grade. It's just that it has to be tailored to that particular population and that grade population.
And I just want to mention that it's just amazing to see how when we had these sessions with the teachers and the parents together. And it's very a humbling experience to see the teacher learning from the parents about their experience as immigrants and share about the challenges they face with the system, the challenges they face as an immigrants. So that is kind of a beautiful experience, and I really believe that it's so easy to replicate. First of all, in other jurisdictions, but also with the parents of small kids.
Thank you very much. Now I'd welcome you if you want to add any more questions in the chat, or just unmute yourself or raise your hand, however you want to do it. I think we have a manageable group of people. Here's your opportunity.
I have a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very well. Please, you go ahead, Ms. Jill.
Well, first of all, thank you to Gustavo and George for your wonderful presentation. Really appreciate the incredible work, impressive work that you're doing. I have a lot of questions actually, but the one that I think is a quick one is related to the unaccompanied minors that you pointed out as a great emerging need. Out of the 72% who come to Maryland, you mentioned that a lot of them come for unification purposes. I'm wondering what happens to them if they are not unified with family, and what percentage is that? And do they end up in the foster system, or what happens to them when they're over age? So who tracks them, and how is that support given to the kids who actually become young adults and age out of the school system, and then what happens to them?
So I'm going to ask George to respond to this, but I just want to emphasize the big challenge that we have in our state. More than 7,000 kids arriving in, a year and a half, 7,000. And they are like, boys, the majority of them, 68%, 15 years old, right? What a great opportunity do we have to make sure that we integrate those kids in the system, and to make sure that we really give opportunity to them, because if they are successful, the entire family is going to be successful. So anyway, I really, really want to see if we can come together as a nonprofit organization, but because it's not only Casa, many organizations working with them as a nonprofit organization and the schools to work together to address that issue, because I believe that we need to have, as George mentioned, a very comprehensive, a statewide approach to this situation that we are facing right now, right over here in Maryland. But George, please, you go ahead and answer the question that Ms. Jill put to you.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and actually a really good point that we should have. I should have prefaced those statistics by mentioning that these are an undercount completely. So number one, these come from DHS themselves, Department of Homeland Security. This reflects the people that were the underage kids that were in detention, that were captured at the border, right? That were processed by DHS, released to HHS, who then had an application, received processed an application of a sponsor that was vetted through HHS, and then that sponsor lives in Maryland, right? So you see that entire bureaucracy there, and that shows you right off the bat that this is a huge undercount. There is a whole lot, many more people that did not go through that system that are arriving still that we know of, right? We don't have the hard statistics, and that's why we rely on the DHS. That's number one. Number two is there is no, when they come over age, there's nothing that is that mandates what services should be received by these individuals. There's no other than what already exists, right, within the particular state and the education rights that an underage person has. But there is no blueprint for these kids, right, that the federal government has a direct responsibility for. So there's a lot of lack of communication between the federal, state, and local jurisdictions about following these kids. That's one of the number one complaints we get from the local educational jurisdictions, right? The LEAs, they have no communication with DHS. Nobody's letting them know that these kids are coming. These are just reports that they publish on a quarterly basis and update every once in a while, right? And that's how we capture that information. But there is a lot of lack of data, a lot of lack of clarity and transparency about, and lack of accountability, frankly, as to what happens next, right? After a individual is paired, after a youth is paired with a sponsor. But did that address some of your questions?
Anne Marie?
You did.
So I would like to see if there is a way to do the TPC program with some of those families that foster the students, because I think that the ones I've interacted with also need similar support in understanding the challenges. So they reach out because it feels like something that they want to do, but they also might need the support in understanding the complexity of these students' lives.
Absolutely. We are ready. I mean, of course, that it required to make sure that we have additional resources, but we're happy to. We have the curriculum, we have everything ready to. And as I mentioned, it can replicate with them or with the, parents who have small kids. I mean, the model is there. Thank you.
Absolutely. And a significant portion of the folks that went through our program initially in those years were actually recently arrived within the last 1 or 2 years that went through the program and then were placed in these international schools. That was the whole point of that's why it was a comprehensive strategy of setting up the school for success to teaching those kids and setting up the parents and the students for success and entering into those schools, right? And now we're seeing, I'm sure you guys are aware, right? Langley Park, specifically international school, has had amazing outcomes. I forgot how many millions of dollars really in scholarships some of the first graduates have received. It's been incredibly successful and something that's worthy of a lot of praise from the school itself on how it's succeeded with these kids in even their college and their career readiness.
Any more questions for our guests?
Well, if not, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity, and we stand ready to answer any questions that you may have in the near future, even by email, or just give us a call and we are ready. And again, thank you so much, and I wish you the best and good weekend.
Well, thank you. We're very grateful. And we learned so much, and you'll hear from us because I wrote down some questions. So yes, and I'm sure we'll have more as we move forward with this work this year.
Awesome. You have a nice one. Thank you.
So Jason, if we could return to our PowerPoint, this discussion we've had links directly with one of our 8 recommendations that are in the interim report that we presented. And we pulled out from that recommendation and the report some of the deliverables that are linked to, guess who? The work group. So the first one has to do with national exemplars, and it certainly sounds like we have some right in our backyard. And then we will look at one of the suggestions that came up about regional language access, because we have these huge counties that we just discussed, but we also have smaller counties that also have multilingual learners that need language access. And finally, here's one for MSDE about needs about training. We certainly just heard about that as far as community outreach, but specifically around the asset-based perspective and emphasizing the rights of our stakeholders that are multilingual. So if we move to the next slide, now's a more chance for you to get involved with the discussion. And I'm going to turn this over to Laurel. Laurel and Ilhe will be taking notes and making sure we manage the chat box. You'll have multiple opportunities, however you feel comfortable, to provide input.
Thank you, Susan. So Ilhe's going to post in the chat, or maybe she did already, a link to our Jamboard that we have created to gather your input. And then I'm going to share my screen so that we can see it live on our meeting here. So when we thought about what we heard today and when we were examining our recommendation, we wanted to gather your input, and we thought a good way would be to use this Jamboard. I'm going to go through really quickly how to use the Jamboard, and then I will guide us through the questions that we have posted there. So if you're not familiar with Jamboard, you can click right here on this little icon that looks like a sticky note. You can click it to create a new sticky note, and then add it to our screen under the appropriate column. If you're not comfortable using Jamboard at all, you're welcome to add your contributions in the chat box in Ilhe, and I will make sure that they're reflected on our shared input here. So the three questions that we wanted to gain further insight into and get your insight on are thinking about what we just heard from Casa and how we could expand some of what we heard from them in Maryland. I heard Mr. Torres say many times that, you know, he believes that we need a comprehensive statewide approach, right, to working with these families and to working with these special student populations. So if you have some ideas about something you heard that you think we could expand in Maryland, this would be the place to add it. The second question we have is what other ways are there to engage multilingual families? So any ideas that you've heard of, anything you know of that is best practice in your field or that your colleagues or coworkers are doing. And then finally, we've invited Casa, but perhaps you know about some other community organizations that we could invite to share with to present to the work group that really authentically engage with English learners and their families. And just a quick note to norm our terminology here. When I wanted to make sure we all understood what authentic engagement meant and what we were trying to get at when we used that term. So I met quickly with our Title I family engagement specialist, and she helped me understand that really when we say authentic family engagement, we're looking for family engagement that reflects a lot of the things that Mr. Torres spoke about. So it's bi-directional, right? It's mutually respectful, it's intentional, it's culturally respective, it's interactive, and all of that in the realm of being in service of children's learning and families' well-being. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer. And if you, we're going to just spend a few minutes here adding ideas, and we're here if you have any questions. So thank you. I'm trying to open. There we go. Okay. We do have some ideas already in our Jamboard, which is great. Can you guys see you can see it, right? Yeah, okay. Susan, do you want to give us a time when you think, just to let, you know, maybe let us know when we think we're ready to move on. Not yet. We still have the ideas flowing, which is great.
Maybe another 2 minutes.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your input. And I was just reflecting on the fact that we could probably spend the whole year working just on implementing some of the suggestions you have here and talking about this topic, which is very important. I wanted to ask my team here to help me, but we certainly saw validation of some of the things we heard from our guest speakers, such as multi-generational learning together, holistic and comprehensive approach with families, and then real specific things such as more PD for teachers and helping them get MSDE CPD credits. And collaboration across districts also aligns to the comprehensive plan. Certainly something that rang true with me was the mention of how the enrollment process is different across our school systems for families. And that certainly makes it difficult for any groups that are providing assistance, such as Casa, if they need to know different rules for each school system, so that that links also to the need for more comprehensive systems and policies even. How do we get families involved? How do we grow our own multilingual and bilingual staff and educators? Working with local colleges, working beyond Title I with family engagement. I see that theme several times because they certainly do have a robust program and they do work very closely with our team here. But there are still some silos, if you will, that I think are being addressed here. And we have specific people to reach out in our third question, which we appreciate. And I'm going to suggest that we can compile this so that you can look at it and we can maybe get some deliverables and some action steps from here. Any others that you saw that we need to bring to the attention of the group? I know you're all reading them also. I love the color coding too. Anything else from our group on this topic? Anne Marie also validates that there's, in addition to these different policies with enrollment, the transcript analysis process is a challenge and it's not a quick turnaround oftentimes. Anything else in the chat box, Ilhay? So if we could,
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, and we'll transition to the slideshow again. I mentioned that it looks like based on your input and also some of the issues we uncovered today, we could talk about family engagement for the rest of the year. But we do have some other topics that we've found, first of all, by revisiting the blueprint and some of the mandates within the blueprint for our group. And then also from engagement with stakeholders. So family engagement is right on top, and we've started that, and we definitely need to circle back to that content. And we haven't touched on funding. There are certainly several mentions of it in our recommendations, exploring funding and so forth, but we need to talk a little bit about what the existing funding is, the impact of Blueprint on that funding for ELs, and then explore some national funding models in more depth. We heard from some of our states that we heard last year, but we need to learn more about that. And right on top of this little list, the third list with 4 bullets, we talked a lot in the report and certainly with our national experts in our previous meetings about the younger dual language learners. But we have not touched on the topic of the older English learners. And we heard that loud and clear today from Casa de Maryland. And we know these statistics were very helpful and very compelling. We talked about newly arrived ELs. So these are areas that we need to further study. Long-term ELs, we can dive into some of that data for our state and how we align to national data in that area. And we haven't discussed English learners that are dually identified and have a disability. We have some suggestions around the area of accountability and assessment. How it wraps into school improvement policies is something we need to explore further. And our accountability system is somewhere where we need to discuss more about what our recommendations would be of how we rate schools and their work with multilingual students. Once again, we're going to ask for your input, and this time just feel free to unmute yourself or add in the chat box what other topics, knowing what we have on the table here and the work we have to do, what have we missed?
Hello, this is Connor Williams. I wanted to just touch on the third bullet there a moment. And it's not a competition and it's not a zero-sum game, of course, but I would want to urge us that as we're looking at those 4 subtopics there, long-term ELs are almost by definition older ELs. And by and large, this is the much smaller group within the EL subgroup. There's just overwhelmingly something like 3/4 to 9 out of 10 English learners in the United States are native-born 2nd generation or 3rd generation kids. So the overwhelming number of kids we're talking about when we're talking about ELs are in the early grades, or they've gotten to the older grades and they are an older EL. But that's generally the research suggests that at that point, the solution is not in the older grades at that point. There's really dispiriting research on this, that the percentage of ELs who get reclassified after they get into the older grades are very, very low. There's a study in Chicago where something like 2% of reclassified ELs were reclassified after middle school, whereas 70-something percent, 76 or 78% of ELs were reclassified before they got to middle school. And again, this isn't to say that we shouldn't attend to these subtopics. It's only to say that I want to make sure that as we look at them, much of long-term EL policy needs to be focused on avoiding the point where students reach long-term EL status, not supplemental post-reactionary responses at that point. If only because we all have limited time and energy and resources are short, that we should be putting as much attention as we can into those early levels. Now, that said, again, I think there's a lot to be said, especially given what we just saw about the stats from Maryland being one of the higher states for newcomers, and 7,000 new kids in a year. That's a dramatic increase and definitely worth attention. But I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that we've spent so much time focusing on younger ELs and dual language learners, in part because that's where so many of the students are.
Thank you very much. And another thing that we internally on our team we're looking at, we have a very strong recommendation about two-way immersion. However, there are only at this point about 7 of our local school systems where we have the numbers to support those programs. So to Connor's point, for students in those early grades in our elementary programs, we need to focus on what does the English language development program look like, or what recommendations do we have about that program for those who in schools where a dual language immersion program is not feasible. So that's a whole other area. What do we have here? Ilhe, are you monitoring the chat box?
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure. And Ilhe, you're muted.
Oh.
Go ahead. You
Am
are
I
not.
still
Go,
muted?
Libya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so I want to support Connor's point on bullet 3, but I'd like to put a little emphasis on the last bullet, and you mentioned it, Susan. I'd be very interested in learning more about data trends in Maryland. What happens to, and this will go with the assessment and diagnostic recommendations, I hope, that are there a disproportionate number of ELs misdiagnosed as special education students, or the vice versa? Sometimes they're overlooked when they actually need support with special education. And what is that picture? Just to get a better sense of the proportion of ELs in Maryland who are either overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed in this area because they're ELs.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. So to answer your question, Livia, Maryland is right on like in a national trend. So we have about between 10 and 12% of our English learners identified as ELs with disabilities. And this year we have a little over 100,000 English learners taking the assessment right now in January. So 12% is a little over, but we sort of stay between 10 and 12. So I think we are right on identifying these students. And of course, of those 12% of English learners with disabilities, about 1% of them are also identified as having significant cognitive disabilities.
Do you know what percentage, maybe, I don't know if you track this, are diagnosed as having dyslexia?
That I am not sure. I have to look at it. I don't know if we have a code for dyslexia in our data system. It might be at the special education because we mainly track like first like disabilities such as speech,
Right.
and
And
the
language. Yeah.
yes, those kind of things. I don't remember seeing dyslexia as one of the indicators that the local school systems can enter into the data system.
Yeah. Thank
We
you.
have Dara, on the call here and from our research office. So we'll look into that for you. And I know she's taking notes of
Thank
our
you.
data requests. Hi, Dara.
Thank you.
We got lots of questions came in while Livia and I was talking. So let me move up to see, make sure. So we appreciate Connor's comment about the older ELs and long-term ELs. Yes, we do know that it's not a large number of students and it's a small portion. But as Susan mentioned, we did talk a lot about 2A emerging or dual language learner, dual language program for the starting in younger grades. We do need to look at making sure that the ELD program for other school systems and where the TWI is not feasible. So while we're working on all those, these are the topics that we may look into a little further. And of course, we have some questions about undercredited and older students. So when we say long-term ELs, it doesn't necessarily all include older ELs there because historically in Maryland, we have received lots of students who are over 17, 18, or 19 in some cases with interrupted education. So that kind of goes with the SLIFE students, and they have no credits or not enough credits. And then of course, in Maryland, by law, they can attend school up to 21, but that time is not enough for them to learn English, get enough credits, and graduate it. So that's something that we were thinking to develop some sort of a policy or some guidance. And as you heard from Casa's presentation, Maryland is number 6 in the nation receiving these unaccompanied minors. And that's one of the reasons why we have such high number of older ELs coming to school system without enough credit or obviously formal language or English. Then we had some questions about.
And I just wanted to mention to the group that it's great to see them adding questions or things for us to think about in the chat, because what we're going to do is compile it and add to what we have. So don't feel like we have to answer it right now. We don't need to make any promises.
I know.
The group has a lot of work that we have to do, but we want to make sure we read aloud the question so that for those who are watching, we elevate what the questions are. So thank you everyone for continuing to drop your thoughts and ideas in the chat. Go ahead, keep it going, Ilhai.
Yes, so there are some questions about how we support EL credits so ELs can earn world language classes for UMD completer, and about the new graduation requirements affecting ELs and the Maryland Zero Biliteracy. And we also have, so Connor also mentioned that for the recommendation on English language development program to push these programs closer to academic instruction language vocabulary in all ways. Yes, we will definitely look at that. And then Livia mentioned something about another research. Oh, so Livia, can you tell me something about this research that you published last month? Is this on the top? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Drew said it. Oh, Drew, so you had a research on ELs with disabilities that you wrote?
Yes, this was actually just published in the State Standard of Education for all school boards of education throughout the country. So it's a very specific journal, basically addressing the issues regarding addressing English learners with disabilities, refocusing on 3 areas.
Okay.
Lack of knowledge that most educators have, as well as administrators, in terms of differentiating second language acquisition needs from cross-cultural differences, from actual disability or exceptional needs. The lack of funding, issues with funding at the state levels that many places are having regarding Title III funds, Title I funds, funds from IDEA, as well as how to actually prepare educators in real time. So this was meant for an audience that is not familiar with TESOL, not that familiar with special education, and knew almost nothing about this population even existing.
Okay.
And really focusing on what can we do at the state level as opposed to in individual school systems or districts or individual schools. So it's really looking at things from the top down. And it's looking at things from a very interesting perspective, really focusing on the notion of certification and dual certification. That was the whole emphasis as well. So for example, I know that's one of what we're focusing on in the interim report. And looking at those 4 bullet points that we're seeing under big bullet point number 3, I think a lot of these components can be discussed in terms of how to focus on the notion of dual certification. So I'm a huge proponent of ESOL and X, dual certified. So ESOL and special education. ESOL in any of the middle school or high school certifications. People who understand how to work with older learners, but also are learning what is the second language acquisition process, what are our older recent arrivals, unaccompanied minors, what are they experiencing? Bringing the strengths from both of those areas together. I think the notion of pushing dual certification or really making add-on certification more practical and something that people want to get would help to address, in fact, all of those 4 subpoints.
Well, thanks for sharing. Well, I'll be curious to look at your report.
And I also noticed about that there is a desire to have more information on that topic about data. And I saw that Anjali, good point. I thought we had a bullet here and it might have escaped about the loss of learning, a key strand that was included in our task. So we do have that on our list. And thank you very much for pointing it out.
And we have some more questions about the graduation requirement and accountability. And, you know, we definitely have a session that we're going to be talking about, like Susan mentioned, about assessment and accountability and how that is going to impact school improvement policies. So rest assured, Paula, we will be discussing this further. And of course, there are more questions about MCAP. And yeah, lots of questions about accountability and assessment. Sarah mentioned something about looking into disability designation with EL data. Oh, that's what Susan just mentioned.
There was a request for Drew's research from Libya. So maybe Drew, if you wanted to share a link to your research with one of us via email, we're happy to share it.
I actually just put it in the chat, if that's okay.
Awesome. Yeah,
Oh,
just
great.
please.
Perfect.
Yes.
And we'll post it on our website for those in the public who would like to see it.
And I was actually curious, maybe if Connor, you mentioned some of the research on the reclassification rates of LTELs. You know, if you have that handy or you know an easy way to find that, if you wanted to share that with us, not necessarily right now during the meeting, but via email, I would appreciate that as well.
Livia requested about the special ed and EL data trends. So yeah, we will definitely look into that. And Connor did mention more about the ELs who need IEPs and sometimes overlooked because of linguistic diversity. Yes, and I can proudly say that Maryland has worked really well on this topic, and we have a lot of school systems having bilingual assessors, and you know they're not just looking at the language as a deficit, and then they need a special education. And I know that has happened in the early 80s and 90s into some 2000, but we will definitely look into that. And then of course, Drew mentioned about the long-term English learners. And I
Drew
know that
also has a question here because we were seeking some information from the University of Maryland undergraduate admissions office, and we have heard from them. And I think it will be helpful to, we did share it with world language supervisors to work it into, I see all of these suggestions working into topics we already have about accountability, because we do have in our accountability, the University of Maryland Completer, it's called. That is one of the components of our high school accountability.
Yep. So, I mean, yes, the comments are coming in. I mean, we didn't really highlight everything, but a lot of these comments are already in our topic that we're going to be addressing. So thank you again for sharing your ideas. This is very helpful.
And we will be sharing, we do capture the comments and we'll post them on the website with the meeting materials afterwards so everyone can see them. And we'll also be compiling them under these topics.
Yes. And then
So
I'm sorry. So go ahead, Susan.
No, I wanted to ask if there were any topics that we missed or that don't fold into these categories.
I don't think so. And of course, when we are having the meeting, I mean, all the things that we listed, like 3 things that we listed at least, like older EOs, supporting newly arrived EOs, and long-term EOs, that could be like one topic that we could spend time, not individually, one meeting with each topic. And I read all the comments. I don't think there was any new topic. Most of them were going to.
Anjali just added a new comment about certification and COMAR updates.
That was already in the recommendation. So yes.
Those are in our, yes, our preliminary recommendations.
And Anjali, hold that thought because we'll be talking a little bit about how our meetings will be organized and that you bring up an excellent point.
And then Connor just posted the study from Chicago. So that's in the chat box, those of you who are interested in downloading it. And then
again, we'll post all of these items on the website.
Yes. He also mentioned the LA Unified School District has also the similar data. And the study on long-term EOs is huge in California. So it's the data from LA Unified School District.
You'd have that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm allowing sufficient wait time. Any other comments, questions?
I mean, yet.
Jason, could you move us to the next slide? So as I mentioned, when we're talking about this year that we're already into, our plan is to have meetings at least once a month and to add additional work sessions because we do have some deliverables and we'll want to dive more deeply into some of these topics and perhaps have something come out of it in the form of a deliverable or outline for policy, etc. And then we've proposed format that's aligned to each meeting and its purpose. So on the next slide, we've kind of sketched out for you. The first group is very familiar to you. This is the way we ran our meetings last year with a guiding question, looking at national perspective and what's happening here in Maryland, always looking to the research and then diving into the data here in Maryland and nationally. And we even had that today with with the data that was presented by Casa. And then as much discussion and focusing on the recommendations as is possible. And we have promised to we build in more opportunity for your input and more time for that. And then as we envision these work sessions with a specific deliverable or a very focused topic that we would engage in conversation and then actually work on something, produce something, and then identify next steps after that. As you looked at the report, a lot of the preliminary recommendations did have suggestions for next steps for us as a work group, certainly for us here at MSDE. And we have our work ahead of us, clearly. And we've already proposed the meeting dates, and they're on the next slide. We're going back to the 3 to 5 time frame, and we've scheduled these dates and we'll send them to you so you don't have to take notes here. We will share them with you. And then on the next slide, I'd like to step back for a moment and just remind you how this work is framed. It's all around the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. And we have a page on our website. We have a specific area to provide feedback on our report. And let's see.
Ilhe's posting those links in the chat.
Good. And then I'm even going to step back further from our work and look at Maryland Public Schools as a whole. We are in the process of getting input on our strategic planning that is, again, aligned to the blueprint. And this is where we have a survey, and we would really appreciate your input on that and sharing it with everyone you can, because we want across all stakeholders, students, parents, community members, educators, and we would really appreciate your help in getting the word out. We are truly ahead of schedule today.
Yes, wow.
And so before we leave, we have an opportunity for any input from you, any additional questions.
Susan, I see
I want to.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
the survey was available in different languages. Yes,
Yes.
it is available. And thank you. The links are in the chat. It's really important if you all could help be ambassadors to spread the word, because the superintendent, Mr. Chori, is really committed, and the State Board of Education, to getting input. So please be our ambassadors too and share these links.
So Olivia asked about the feedback aside from a
I
survey.
believe, and Dr. Collins, you may be able to help me with this. I believe there are plans for events where there will be public input, whether they'll be virtual or face-to-face. I'm not sure that that's confirmed, but we're even talking about one focused on the multilingual community. So as a whole, so plans are there.
Yes, there will be other opportunities to engage beyond the survey. Also in the chat, Ilhe put in an email address, blueprint.msde@maryland.gov. If you don't want to complete the survey, you want to send an email, they check those emails and read every single comment. They really do. So that's another way, if you're not comfortable completing the survey, but you have questions or want to provide feedback, please feel free to email blueprint.msd@maryland.gov. That is another way, and I can assure you they will read and respond. And yes, as Susan mentioned, the superintendent likes to cast the net wide. And so our communications team has been doing some engagement events, and we'll continue to do that with various communities, because that stakeholder input is very important. So thank you for asking that.
We have a question from Drew about how long will you accept feedback?
So beyond the survey, I would just say, sort of in response to that blueprint for msd@maryland.org is always open. So even if the survey closes, that is a good way to provide feedback along the way. The links themselves and on the website clarify all the information about the survey and the timeline. But regardless, that generic link, blueprint@msd@maryland.gov, can be a way to provide feedback, even when the survey's closed.
So we have a question from Anne Marie about, can some of those face-to-face feedback sessions be held at Casa and other similar organizations?
I know our community outreach specialist in the communications office is already taking steps like that to engage some of these community organizations in actually putting on these feedback sessions. So it'll be a partnership, but your point is well taken, because they have the contacts. They are trusted community partners that can sometimes encourage people to come more so than an invitation from the Maryland State Department of Education. So together, we hope to get authentic engagement, as Laurel talked about. Well, this has to be a first. That, as far as I know, we've established lots of work to do in the future. We've addressed everything that was on our agenda, and we had lots of opportunity for input. So we thank you. Anything else, Dr. Collins? Did I miss?
Oh, we are good. We're just very appreciative to the EL work group. We look forward to our engagement, and we thank the community that's been watching. We're very, very appreciated.
Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you in March, and have a wonderful weekend.
Have a good one, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd also like to remind you that Jamboard is open. If you want to add more to
That's
it,
right.
it's still live.
Susan, Laurel, hey, do you know when the March meeting is?
March. I'll send you the we'll be March 24th.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had it. I knew you didn't share it with everybody, but I wanted to just make sure.
No, it was on the
So
slide.
we did just share them on the slides.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry.
All the meetings are kind of in the 20s, but we'll send them to you as soon as we get off this meeting.
Thank you. Have a
We could do a hold, I guess, a hold meeting invitation, right, Laurel? Notice I'm asking you.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks.
I can close the meeting now, right?
Yes.
So should I come?
Did you grab everything in the chat?
I think Jason was supposed to. Oh, you got it.
All.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yes,
So we got them all. Yep.